Today we're going to talk about writing similes and writing metaphors. Our lesson goal for the day is I will write meaningful similes and metaphors. Emphasis on that word meaningful. Before we can talk about writing a simile and metaphor, let's review a little bit. What's the difference between a simile and a metaphor? So a simile uses the word like or as when it makes a comparison. A metaphor doesn't. So a metaphor might say, you're a weasel. That's a metaphor because it's comparing the person to a weasel. But it doesn't use the words like or as. A simile might be, you are just like a weasel. That would be a simile because you're still comparing the person to a weasel, but it uses the word like. So if it compares two things without the word like or as, without the words like or as, it's a metaphor. But if it compares two things with the word like or as, then it's a simile. So if I say ogres are like onions, I'm using the word like, that's a simile. The purpose of similes and metaphors is to compare two different things. Similes and metaphors let the reader picture your meaning more clearly. But watch out. The comparisons we make with similes and metaphors should never be random or dull. Just putting the word like doesn't make it a simile. Just saying you are something doesn't make it a metaphor. If the words are random and they don't make sense, then they don't work as figurative language, because the whole point of figurative language is to make sure that you understand or your reader understands the comparison. So what's the comparison in each of these and why does it make sense? All the world's a stage. That one's a metaphor from Shakespeare. Life is a highway from Tom Cochrane. Life is like a box of chocolates from Forrest Gump. All of those are similes, are metaphors. Let's look a little bit more specifically. So, if we were going to write a simile or a metaphor comparing life to a stage, there are some specific steps we would need to take. Again, we want to write a simile that compares a stage to life, or a metaphor that compares a stage to life. So first we would start with a brainstorm. What do life and a stage have in common? So we're actually not interested in this side of the Venn diagram. We don't care how they're different. We only want to think about how life and a stage are similar. How is life like a stage? What do they have in common? I'm going to give you 10 seconds. If you need longer than that, pause this video. Okay, so some ways that a stage is like life. So a stage and a life both tell a story. You have a life story, your biography, the story of all the things you've experienced. And on a stage, you act out stories on the stage. You have both have scenes. So in your life, there's going to be many different moments, and each moment is a scene. There's different stages of your life. So first you're a child, you're in your childhood, and then you're an adult, and then you're an elderly person. Those are the stages of your life. Well, a play might have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, different scenes of the play. So some lives and some plays are happy or tragic. Some are just average. They have exits and entrances. So based on those similarities, we would write a simile or a metaphor. Now, y'all are going to have to forgive me because you know I can't really write with this mouse. But life is like so I use that word like. Life is like a stage because, there's my subordinating conjunction. Got a complex sentence going on. Life is like a stage because both both can have a happy, oh, that doesn't look like an A, does it? A happy or tragic story. Depending on your choices. Now notice I didn't just randomly say, life is a stage. That wouldn't be good enough. I have to show some reason why life is like a stage. So life is like a stage because both can have a happy or tragic story, depending on your choices. The most famous version of this comparison is from Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Okay? But what about a highway in life? What if we had to write a simile or a metaphor comparing life to a highway? How's life like a highway? And I know everybody has that song stuck in their head now, but we still have to go through the exact same steps. Step one, we would brainstorm. So I'm going to go ahead with my pen. Again, we're not interested in how they're different. We only want to know how they're the same. How is life like a highway? I'm going to give you 10 seconds to brainstorm. Okay, pause if you need more time. So, life is like a highway because they both involve journey. They both require a direction to get to a destination. If you just drift through life, you're never going to get anywhere. If you just drift on the highway, you're never going to get anywhere in particular. You won't like get to a specific destination. You can get lost if you're not careful. You can't always see what's coming. There are bends in the road or unexpected obstacles. You have to be careful or you can get hurt or hurt others. So if I said, life is a highway. I didn't use like or as, so that's a metaphor. Life is a highway. You have to pay attention to get where you're going. Okay. Remember, effective metaphors aren't just A equals B. It's not just life is a highway or life is a stage. Same thing for effective similes. You have to make sure that you have a reason that we can see. Why are those two things similar to each other? So what's the comparison in these famous similes or metaphors, and why do they make sense? Well, if I say conscience is a man's compass, like your conscience is like what tells you right from wrong. So a conscience is a man's compass. It's like a compass because your conscience tells you what direction to go in life, and a compass tells you what direction to go when you're lost. If I say chaos is a friend of mine, well, if you're with a friend, you're super comfortable with a friend. You trust them, you're relaxed around them, you hang out all the time. So if you're saying chaos is a friend of mine, it means you're used to chaos, you're always with chaos, you're comfortable in chaos. If I say a hospital bed is a parked taxi with the meter running, if you've ever been somewhere where people drive taxis a lot, if you tell the taxi to park outside, they're going to run something called the meter, which is where they keep track of how much time you've been using that taxi, how long they've been waiting for you, and they charge you by the minute. So if you're saying a hospital bed is like a parked taxi with the meter running, it means you're not getting to go anywhere, but they're charging you for every minute. Okay, so let's take a look at our assignment today. Your assignment is going to be in OneNote. It's going to be called Writing Similes and Metaphors Activity. First step is to look at or fill in the words in the two boxes. So word 1 is going to be the first word you're comparing. Word 2 is going to be the second word you're comparing. So in this case, we're going to write a simile or a metaphor comparing growing up to the ocean. Step 2 is to brainstorm how those two words are alike. So some of the brainstorms I came up with are scientists are still exploring deep parts of the ocean, and we don't know everything about growing up until we get there. Another way that they're similar that I thought of is when you go swimming, you start in the shallow part of the water and everything's calm, but then you have to go deeper. And then little kids are kind of shallow, but our lives get more complicated as we grow up. After you brainstorm how these are alike, then you will go ahead, write your simile or your metaphor. Remember, you have to give a reason so we understand why you made that comparison. So you may start out shallow, but the further you swim, the deeper, murkier everything gets. For 2 and 3, you will need to pick which two words you are comparing, highlight them, and write them in the box.